Connecting. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope this is working. I want to welcome everybody today to our virtual event, The Art of Tea with Steve Schwartz, who's here with us live.
Hey, everyone.
There he is.
Honored to be here.
We have so many students signed on from our culinary management program and our health supportive program from east to west, New York, all the way to LA, right where Steve and I both are. So as always, I just want to remind everybody to put your questions into the Q&A or into the chat. We'll find them and we'll be able to get back to you. As I mentioned in the reminder, beverages are a really key component to any restaurant. So what better way to understand tea than we want you to hear from a master tea blender and founder of The Art of Tea, Steve Schwartz. He's going to dive into the topic of tea today with a focus on matcha. So thank you for joining us, Steve. Just a little introduction before I pass things off. Steve is the founder of Art of Tea, a handcrafted tea purveyor based here in Los Angeles. He started that company in 2004, and I will let him tell you exactly how he got into it. But one of the things that led him there was an interest in Eastern medicine, which also led him to studying Ayurveda. So that sparked his passion for combining herbs and botanicals and going on that journey that has led him to so many travels around the world to deepen his knowledge even further and cultivating long-lasting relationships with farmers to source the best and highest quality teas and ingredients. Steve has worked with many acclaimed brands that you've heard of and chefs and restaurants such as Google, Vera Wang, Slack, which we use here often, the Peninsula Hotels, the Huntington Gardens, which are here in Pasadena actually, Wolfgang Puck, Rustic Canyon Group, and Kraft Los Angeles, and others. So with that, what I am going to say, let Steve take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. So extremely honored to be here tracking with you guys today. So before we get into a little bit of background on myself, I'm just going to ask the question. I want you to think about this question. You could chat the message if you like, but when you think of that simple three-letter word that we know of as tea, what for you comes to mind? Now, it could be a thought, it could be a geographic location, it could be a function, right? Like a wellness proponent behind it. It could be time, right? A very specific ritualistic time, whether it's I wake up with it or I go to sleep with tea, whatever that might be for you. When you think of tea, what for you typically comes to mind? Now, there's no right or wrong answer here. It really is your own interpretation of what you think of when you think of tea. So as you're thinking about it, I'm going to get a little scientific here, a little geeky here on what tea is and what tea is not. Well, first of all, what we found was that people drink tea because of four major reasons. One is it just tastes good. I like tea. Second is they want the functionality behind it. Like my stomach hurts, I need something to help aid in digestion. The third is the ritual aspect, right? I wake up, I can't get out of bed, I can't start my morning, I can't start my day unless I get in that zone, that tea mind type state. And the other proponent really is some sort of a nostalgia, and that could be I grew up drinking tea with my grandmother on the front porch, or when I was traveling in Paris, I remember sitting out at a cafe and enjoying just a beautiful, delicious glass of tea. Or I remember visiting gardens when I was in Asia studying abroad and seeing, just the beautiful layers of tea gardens that are there. So there's so many different reasons why and what tea means in our lives. But really tea, I'm going to get a little scientific, a little geeky here, okay? So I hope I don't lose you guys, but I'm going to use a wine analogy. So all wine typically comes from what type of fruit? Grapes, right? So now depending on what type of grape you use, is it a Merlot grape? Is it a Champagne grape? And is that grape grown and harvested in Napa or is it in Bordeaux? So depending on where it's grown, that's important. Then we can get even more granular and more nitty gritty, right? It's what's the terroir? What's the soil conditions like? Are they harvesting the grape in the morning or later in the day? After they crush the grapes, are they leaving the skin on, or are they storing it in an oak barrel or stainless steel container? So all these things go into making a delicious glass of wine. And the same thing happens in terms of tea. So all true tea comes from an evergreen shrub called Camellia sinensis. Okay, so white, green, oolong, black, and pu'er all come from Camellia sinensis. So yes, we're going to dive into matcha, which is a really interesting vertical, but I wanted to kind of go top layer first, get a good broad understanding of what tea is. So to continue along this, path of what tea is, you have three major varietals: Camellia sinensis, Camellia sinensis Assamic, and Camellia sinensis Cambode. And within those, you have thousands of subvarietals of Camellia sinensis. So then they're crossbred, right? To weather the storms, to weather the extreme temperatures that often is found within tea growing regions and wine growing regions as well, where you get this freezing temperature and frost that hits at night, bright sun in the morning, and that can have an impact on the quality of the leaf and the quality of the grape. So all these major subvarietals create tea. Now, then you have these subcategories. So you have white tea, green tea, oolong tea, black tea, and pu'er tea. So white tea is picked, it's dried, that's it. We believe that true white tea should come from one province, and that's called Fujian province in China. Legend has it that this region, this Fujian province region, where white tea originated, where we still source true authentic white tea, legend has it that the white tea leaves, which only are picked about 7 to 10 days out of the year, were originally picked by women virgins with white gloves and were once reserved for emperors. So just pause here for a moment, right? And think about how fortunate we are that we're able to enjoy something that was once reserved for emperors. And then you have green tea. And we're going to get a bit more myopic on green tea, but just know that there's several major verticals of green tea. There's pan-fired and roasted, and then there's steamed. And we're going to show some slides in a little bit on how Japanese tea and that vertical leads to matcha. And then there's oolongs, and oolongs is anywhere from 1% to 99% oxidized. Meaning, imagine taking a bite out of an apple. You let it. Your mom calls you, and you're on the phone. You forget about the apple, and 5 minutes goes by, or 15 minutes goes by, and that apple's going to start to turn brown. Now, if you're learning remotely in Palm Springs, that oxidization process is going to be totally different than if you're learning remotely in Florida, where the humidity level is extremely different. So the oxidization process for oolongs, what happens is it's usually a family affair. The women will harvest the tea in the morning, and the men will do the roasting process later at night, sometimes 12 at night or 2 o'clock in the morning, when the humidity level adjusts. Then you have black tea, which is 100% cooked and 100% oxidized, right? So all from Camellia sinensis. And then you have a totally unique, funky tea called pu'er. And pu'er is like a fermented, deliberately, the leaves are massaged and then stored in a cool, either dark cave or damp environment for about 90 days, and then stored sometimes for years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. And they tend to go up in value. Just like art, there's a lot of fake art on the marketplace. There's a lot of fake pu'ers where they mimic the aging process. So we're not going to go down that vertical today, but super interesting vertical. And then there's tisanes. And tisanes is a fancy French word that basically means botanicals. So for example, you can have chamomile, pour hot water over that chamomile, have a delicious, enriching experience, but it's not tea. It's a tisane, which basically means, again, herbal fusion. So mint, amazing. Louisa, French verveine, lemon verbena, yerba mate, like all these amazing botanicals are amazing, but they're not from Camellia sinensis. So therefore, it's not a tea. Just like you can't make coffee if it's not from the coffee bean. You can have a delicious cacao experience or a delicious, other beverage experience, but coffee comes from the coffee bean and tea comes from tea leaf. So congratulations. Like, you now know more than 99% of the US population when it comes to tea. And there's many legends why. Well, I thought green tea came from the green tea plant, black tea came from the black tea plant. And there's beautiful stories that we can walk through and why that is, and legends as far as, sort of the secrecy behind sourcing and crafting different teas. Before I go into matcha and really start to dive into matcha, I just want to give you a little background on myself. My background's in Ayurveda. It's a form of preventative medicine based out of India. And the reason why I got into that is because when I was 19 years old, actually, when I finished high school, I got a full paid scholarship to go to college, started going, and then my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer. And I moved out of college, went to go move back in with her and took care of her for close to a year. And we were only on allopathic medicine. So we went from one doctor to the next. There's nothing wrong with Western medicine. It just didn't work for us. I mean, it was like the doctor's like, hey, you could try this experimental treatment, you could try that. Anyway, she ended up passing, and it really, woke me up. It got me thinking, gosh, cancer must have been around for thousands of years. We only just recently labeled it as cancer. Maybe it was called different things in different languages. And so I started to pour through different texts and different books, and so interested a little bit in this philosophy of medicine and that. And but I realized I didn't want to be a massage therapist. I didn't want to stick needles in people. I didn't want to be a nutritionist or a doctor. And I come from a line of wellness practitioners, from doctors and psychologists and physical therapists, but it wasn't my path. But I did find this really interesting school where it incorporated food and cooking and diet and exercise and herbology. And this school in New Mexico, where the doctor that leads it, there's a documentary on him called The Doctor from India. And he incorporated Eastern and Western medicine. I went out, I visited the school, fell in love with it, flew out there, and my family thought I was nuts because at that point, no one was studying preventative medicine. It was like 25 years ago, and it was super weird to be doing that. And I'm sure, still today, Ayurveda is still this emerging thing that's only been around for about 10,000 years, and it's still making an impact, and it's still this innovative thing. But while I was there, I became the only student advanced enough to work with the masters at my school on how to source and blend. And I remember I was on the phone, and this is before the internet really took off. So I was, it was like $3 a minute on the phone with an overseas supplier, and I needed to order some ginkgo. Like, hi, I need to order some ginkgo. I'm like, okay, sir, would you like ginkgo on an eastern slope or a western slope next to a river? So it doesn't matter. I don't care. I just need ginkgo. And he said, no, sir, it does matter. And you need to come here yourself and experience it. Okay, so I was intrigued. I saved up my money. I worked 4 different jobs. I got a backpack, and I started traveling around the world to find the best teas and botanicals possible. So I had no idea that I was going to start a tea company. I just knew that I was becoming a huge tea nerd and into it, and started blending in my living room and caught the attention of Wolfgang Puck and his team. Then caught the attention of a beautiful hotel in Santa Monica called Shutters on the Beach, and Caesar's Palace. I actually ended up training the first tea sommelier in the US. And we really focus on hospitality. So we'll do a matcha service training program. We did a 60-hour matcha service training program at a 5-star restaurant in New York. So we get super granular in depth. We still hand blend and source and pack. We're no longer in my living room. We're about 10 minutes east of downtown LA, still vertically integrated, sourcing, blending, packing, with distribution, not just in North America, but in Singapore and Japan and parts of Europe as well. So that's hopefully I developed some sort of authority and credibility to why I'm teaching today. The government of Japan invited a few years ago 4 tea companies from around the world to come for 10 days and meet with different growers and suppliers. So we were chosen as one of the 4 tea companies, someone from Germany, someone from England, someone from Chicago, and myself, or Art of Tea. So I went on behalf of Art of Tea, and ended up, first of all, I was like way too big. I didn't know if I could go, like so much was going on, but I went already with, the experience of going deep into various jungles and deep into various areas around the world sourcing tea. So I felt like I had a pretty good understanding. I just didn't know how much there could really be learned about Japanese tea in particular. And I was blown away. I mean, like the mastery, even in terms of just one person sitting at a station that has been preparing and rolling I'll show you a picture, but hand rolling leaves and hand drying leaves, has been doing it for 30 years, right? Just really leaning in on mastery. And here we are in our society where it's like, I'm going to try this for a little bit and that for a little bit. I don't know. I'm going to figure out where life takes me to. I'm going to do the absolute best with my full intention on what I'm doing. And for me, tea, especially matcha, helps get me, it sort of clears the phrase of my mind and helps me get in that space, that really honed in zone where if you're a pastry chef and you're making your delicious craft and you need to, be on your feet all day, but stay super focused. Well, we'll talk a bit about matcha and the benefits behind it and why it's great for so many applications. But just that level of mastery, I think, plays so nicely into Japanese tea. So let's start to go into Japanese teas a little bit, if you can help load that. And then we're going to start diving a bit more into matcha. And I'm going to walk you guys through how to work with matcha. So the first thing that you see here, thank you so much for helping me with the slides, by the way. So the
We'll
first
see
thing
how
that
it goes.
okay, you're doing great so far. So the first thing that you're going to see here are these beautiful line rows. Now, this is actually, and in front of the line rows, you'll see it kind of looks like hay in the front. And if you look along the hillside where it's kind of going up, it just looks like, oh, that's just weeds or brush along the outside. Every single square inch that's used near the gardens has intention behind it. So one, the hill that looks like just weeds that are grown on the outside, that's actually what looks like hay on the bushes, protecting the roots. So this is during an off season where it's protecting the roots so that the frost and the cold doesn't impact the quality of the leaf. So there's so much care even in the off season. So if it's off season, why keep it so in such beautiful rows where they sort of look like fresh baked loaves of bread? And one reason is because they, in order to respect their neighbor's lawn, so to speak, or the neighbor's garden, they keep it in these beautiful sections, right? So typically, high quality teas are hand harvested, but the Japanese have figured out a way through technology to be able to harvest the leaves where through a 1 millimeter difference, they're able to go in and pick the exact size leaves that they're looking for. And because they're so short on space in terms of where tea gardens are found within Japan, they found a way to actually, again, using that fresh baked bread analogy, the loaves, the way the bushes are harvested, they get 30% more production if they round the edges. Okay, so that's a little bit about the bushes, but this is a Camellia sinensis plant. This particular varietal that you're looking at is called Yabukita, which is used in a lot of high quality senchas and a lot of high quality green teas. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. There's a little story. I already told you guys a bit about us. Let's go on to the next one. We can continue to go forward. That is the hands, by the way, of the and there's another slide of him, but that was the hands of the gentleman that I was telling you for the last 30 years has been focusing. What he's doing is he's pushing. There's a better picture up ahead, but he's basically pushing, he's extracting extra moisture. And the way that he's churning the leaves, he's doing it in a longitudinal shape. And this style of leaf is used for later processing matcha. So this is a style of leaf called gyokuro. It gives a really rich, dark flavor profile and color profile. So let's go to the next slide, please. You can take a look at how, so what ends up happening is with matcha, you saw the previous slide where there's various leaf grades and colors, some are a little more ambered and some are more yellow, and here it's super vibrant green. So what they end up doing in order to make matcha, they first shade grow the leaves. They have these, either bamboo slats or they have this black mesh that shades it for about 2 weeks. And what that does is it forces the plant to really fight for sunlight. And by fighting for the sunlight, the young, fresh leaves and buds now turn to a really dark color, basically calling the sun like, hey, bring me more light, bring me more. And so it's fighting. And that fight also brings more amino acids, more color, more context, and more sweetness. Amino acids are what give it that full round and body and texture to it. So here you can see that change in color. So let's go to the next slide. We really believe in organic. We actually carry the largest variety of organic teas in the market. The farmer where we get our matcha from, they don't use fertilizers, they use ducks. And the ducks go in and they pick the bugs off the leaves, and they actually help fertilize along with, because Japanese is an island type culture. So you end up getting volcanic ash from Kagoshima, the southern part of Japan, getting fish guts and crab shells mixed into the soil. And so that also adds to the extra umami, that fresh flavor. Okay, let's move forward. This is just a beautiful tea flower. It's not actually consumed. It can be consumed, but you can just see how it is in terms of relation with this camellia plant. Let's go to the next slide. So you can see in the background, well, there's several things going on here. One, these are tea fields. You can see how that black mesh is covering it. And two, these are 2 leaves and a bud. This is the very, tips, the freshest, most sought after tea leaves that you're looking for. And you can see that green vibrancy. So when we're talking about high quality Japanese green tea, the flavor that is often used is umami. In fact, there was a scientist back in, I believe, the 60s who was looking for the ultimate flavor. And he found it in 2 things. He found it in high quality green tea, such as gyokoro and matcha, and he found it in seaweed, which is that flavor sensation of salt and sweet and astringency all combined in one. So really high quality matcha experience, a really high quality green tea experience has that true authentic umami, where it sort of makes your mouth pucker and call for more. So, okay, we'll go to the next slide. So after the leaves are picked, they're brought into these giant baskets where air comes in and helps filter without extra withering. You can see how fresh these beautiful tea leaves are. And we'll go to the next slide, please. And then it starts the process. Now it starts to look like spinach, but the smell in the factories, as they're starting to separate the stem and the leaf, as they start to go through the steaming and cooking and baking process, there are these aromatics that start playing into the factory. There are perfumes that are trying to mimic what tea can smell like. I can tell you that there's no other smell. I can't describe it other than it smells like tea. Now, some of you might be thinking, I don't like tea. And that's okay. Most tea is graded by size. So imagine getting a bag of unsalted, unflavored chips. On the top of the bag, you get these beautiful uniform shapes. And as you work your way down to the middle, they're a bit more broken. And all the way down at the bottom, it's just powder. So typically, except for matcha, typically what happens is they produce the teas in the factories. The dust flies up in the air, falls on the ground, they sweep it in giant piles, and that's what's reserved for most traditional paper tea bags. So for most of you, they're like, I'm a coffee drinker, and I go to the dark side from time to time. I enjoy a good cup of coffee, okay? So I'm not here to bash coffee. I will do just some comparisons in terms of how it affects our body with matcha versus coffee in terms of caffeine. But in terms of matcha, it's deliberately stone ground. In terms of the teas that we source, it's the top 2% of all the teas that are produced in the world. So we're looking for a whole leaf experience. So here, the steaming process, it's going up this elevator where they're constantly being massaged and rotated. The juices are being extracted from the inner part of the leaf and brought out to the surface. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Again, just another picture of it being shade grown. You can see just the light barely coming through and the plant really fighting for that chlorophyll. And we'll go to the next slide, please. This is the gentleman that I was telling you about. Now, okay, remember when you were a kid, or last week because it's fall, and you would see a dry leaf. You pick up that dry leaf and you're holding the stem and you break apart the leaf from that stem particle, right? Can you guys just hear and feel that sensation, right? So what ends up happening is you have a high quality Japanese green tea called sencha. First of all, anytime you hear the word cha, matcha, sencha, again, matcha, cha means tea. Legend has it there's two major ports, the port of cha and the port of tea, where tea would originate from. And the port of cha would go to all throughout Asia. And then if it went down to the Middle East, it would, in India, would be called chai. And if it went out to Europe, it would be called tea or te. So really just depending on where it came from. So cha, so you have sencha. Then you have sencha that is deliberately shade grown and where it brings up that chlorophyll, and that's called gyokuro. What he's doing is he's massaging, he's helping to that final process, and it brings out that extra. It's like throwing your towel in the dryer and smelling it, right? How fresh and how great does that towel smell feel? So this bed that he's massaging on is actually heated, right? So it brings up that extra flavor. So we'll go to the next slide. Now what ends up happening is, using that stem and leaf analogy, the stem particles are removed from the leaf particles. And now you've gone from gyokuro, which is beautiful. It's like a jade dew, stunning green tea. But now you've removed the stem particles and you have what's called tencha. So it's like a broken leaf. That broken leaf particle isn't often consumed on its own, but what it is, it's deliberately stone ground. And so what you're looking at here, this funky looking device, it's a little broom off to the side, is you see a funnel, you see a metal funnel, then you see a very heavy stone layer on top of another very heavy stone layer and a green line in between. So that tencha is pushed inside that funnel and it's stone ground where the stones are moving in opposite direction. And what you end up getting, that green line, is basically powdered tencha that is very delicately and very gently dropping and being pushed through. So it's stone ground at such an effect. Now, we're talking about organic, sorry, not organic. This could be conventional as well. We're talking about ceremonial grade, where it has to go through this process of stone grinding. And this particular style makes about 30 grams per hour. 30 grams per hour. So this is an incredibly time-intensive process. And it's very delicately swept up, and that's what's used for ceremonial grade matcha. Has to come from Japan if it's ceremonial grade. Has to have that vibrant green color. Has to go through those steps of sencha, gyokuro, tencha, stone ground, 30 grams an hour in order for it to be a ceremonial grade. And there's other aspects that you're looking for. Some say not just Japan, but also it needs to come from Uji province, right? Or from Kyoto prefecture. So there's many different ways of angling it and looking at it. Okay, we'll move to the next slide. So in larger factories where they're, you could see after it's been churning for a very long period of time, it's almost like caked in there. And the other reason why it's caked in there is in order to preserve that vibrant green color, it's oftentimes done in a cold environment, not quite near freezing. But when we have our Japanese teas prepared for us, we order, it's in a state of hiracha, where it's near final stage, steamed, baked, ground, air shipped over, and we lock it in our freezer to continue to maintain that vibrant green color. But this just shows you the dust ends up flying, and it's in these self-contained areas. But it's such a fine, delicate process. So let's go back to, or let's keep going. This is obviously a much larger production facility. And you see someone that's picking up the matcha and scooping it and then moving on. Okay, I think that might be one of the last slides. Oh, this is an auction. The auction where various states of hiracha, various states of gyokuro are being sampled. I'm very, very honored to be invited to within Uji prefecture to be able to sample these high grade gyokuros. We've been one really quick story, and that's that I went to go visit the factory that we work with, and I went to the family's house, and it was a beautiful house. It's up in Uji Mountains. I was like, this is really interesting. And then behind, they had a little house where they do the finished processing of their matcha and their gyokuro. And I said, how long have you lived here? And he's like, I'm not sure what you mean. I'm sorry. What do you mean? Like, well, how, it's a nice place. How long have you lived here? We grew up. I grew up here. I was born here. I was like, oh, so your family, your parents bought the house. He's like, oh, no, I know what you're asking me now. We've been here making teas and living in this house at least 10 generations documented, meaning they were doing it even before it was documented. But we have a book of documented ancestry that has been producing these high quality teas for the past 10 generations. And by the way that I met him was, through this trip that I went on by the government in Japan, and he ended up preparing me this beautiful matcha, and I tried it, and he was nervous. He was shaking as he was preparing it for me, and an interpreter, and because he was embarrassed by his English, he didn't want to, and he spoke English beautifully. He understands English beautifully, but he still had an interpreter. And he prepared this matcha for me. I tried it. And I told the interpreter, I said, I don't want to offend him. I don't know why he's so nervous. Please tell him this is the best matcha I've ever had. And both of them laughed and like, oh, he's so happy you liked it. He really was nervous because he just wanted your approval. And as it turns out, he just won best green tea in all of Kyoto. And by the way, and he also just won best green tea in all of Japan. And I thought, man, he's so concerned about me. He has no idea who I am. Like but it was just one guest at a time sort of approach, right? That we all know within hospitality, this one dish at a time. This aspect of just, really wanting to make sure that your energy and love and passion, whatever it might be, really comes through the process, regardless of who it might be. So this really sparked my interest, and we ended up creating, with this Goku varietal of tea, ended up creating this beautiful matcha collectively. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. That's me on a tea machine, looking really dorky, and obviously not being able to drive it. So one of the farmers, he's one of the first organic farmers in Japan, and he got affected by pesticides when he was a little kid and was like, I'm not using pesticides, we're gonna use ducks. So he allowed me to pretend like I'm driving it. So I think that's pretty much it on the slide side. Now we know what matcha, now we know how matcha is being made, right? And there's another way of making matcha. It's, some of it's pulverized. There's different grades of matcha. You have a food grade matcha. You have various grades of matcha. Ceremonial is the highest grade of matcha. But you want to make sure that you get it from a trusted source. Now, one of the main things that you look for, obviously, is that vibrant green color. And the other is, now, why is matcha so hot? Like, what makes matcha so popular? And let's talk a little bit about application. I have to apologize in advance because I can't talk and prepare matcha or tea in general at the same time. So when I get to the stage of me actually making tea, I just want you to know I'm going to have these weird long silences. It's just because I need to concentrate on what I'm doing, because I just can't do I can't multitask. So, okay. So what's the major difference between matcha and regular tea? One major difference is that when you're brewing tea, you're taking tea, you're putting it, inside your strainer, you're taking it in a bag, you're steeping it inside your pot, letting it sit for the appropriate amount of time, and then you're pulling the tea out and you're drinking that extract, right? So you're steeping the tea. Coffee you brew, tea you steep. Matcha is different because you're taking the whole leaf powder that's deliberately stone ground, you whisk it or you froth it to really, bring up the amino acids and really, get that full body texture, and make sure that you don't get that sediment that may settle. You want to get as much of that really activated and going inside the liquid. And you're drinking the entire leaf, which means you're getting all the health benefits, which are the polyphenols, the flavonoids, the catechins, the EGCG, L-theanine, the caffeine. So the way that this affects our body is so different. So coffee, you get this big spike, you crash, you crash, and then it takes a long time to come back to your normal state. So I actually think more people are addicted to the crash of coffee than they are the rush of coffee, because like, I need another shot of espresso, I need another cup of coffee, I'm exhausted. What you end up getting with coffee is a musculoskeletal rush. You can feel super foggy in the head with multiple shots of espresso. But with tea, you end up getting this level of clarity. So tea and matcha and sencha are used in Zen monasteries as a tool for focus, as a tool for meditation. So could you imagine sitting in lotus pose for hours on end on double shots of espresso? It'd be really challenging, right? But with matcha, you get that full body absorption, and you end up getting this effect that's, one, if it's a sensory enhancer, one of the things that we found within Culinary is that before a meal, it gets everything very activated. There's studies that show if you're going to have a business conversation with someone, if you're looking for a decision, then having it over a caffeinated conversation, whether that's coffee or tea, through Robert Cialdini, a sociology professor from Stanford, show that people are more likely to make a yes or no quicker decision if it's over coffee, right? And the same thing with tea. Things get activated with matcha, and as you're sampling and as you're tasting, your sensory experience gets more enlivened. So again, the major difference between a tea that you're steeping and matcha is tea, you're taking the tea leaves out and you're drinking the extract. Matcha, you're consuming the entire leaf. So that's why quality is something you really want to look for. Matcha is sensitive to three major things. It's sensitive to light, it's sensitive to heat, and of course, it's sensitive to humidity. So as long as you keep it away from those three things, you can have matcha last a long time. Now, you can keep matcha in your freezer. As long as it's airtight and it's stored really well, you can have matcha last a long period of time. All right. Now, in terms of application, there's several ways of making matcha. One quick and easy way of making matcha, you're like, I'm on the go, and my understanding is I need like a bowl and a whisk, and I have all these other things. Like, do I need all that stuff? We're going to dive into that. But because it's leaves and water, I think in our society, we tend to be threatened by tea. Like, there's a lot of restaurants that we work with are like, I get nervous when people order tea because I don't want to mess it up or it takes a long time. Well, getting the espresso ready takes the same amount of time as it does getting teapot ready. So in terms of tea, it's leaves and water. So if we can understand, yes, there's rituals around the world, there's beautiful ways of serving tea, but if we take a step back and just appreciate the simplicity of it, this is the real benefit of tea, is that ritualistic aspect of just preparing the water, getting the leaves ready, preparing the bowl or cup, and simply sipping. That has tremendous effects on the body, tremendous effects on the hospitality environment. And it's very, very easy, very, very easy to do. So if we're going to do it, one simple and easy way, and an example that I'm going to use is we actually have our matcha sticks, and these are pre-portion packed. So one way is you would take your favorite water bottle, and remember I said I have these weird long pauses. So I'm going to rip this open. Now, matcha can come in different formats. It can come in a little tin. It can come, you can buy it in a bag. You again, just want to make sure that it's an airtight container. And the thing I like about these sticks is that they are grown, ground, and packed all at origin. So this is about 2 grams of matcha. You can see, hopefully, just the vibrancy. And then you're going to shake it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake it for, like a Polaroid. I'm going to shake it for 20 seconds. So by shaking it, you're going to get a really consistent brew, and I'd like you to take a look along the side. What you end up seeing is that frothiness, that crema, that head that's starting to rise up. And that frothiness is something that you want to really look for when it comes to matcha. Um, it's the amino acids, it's that full body, um, uh, it's that full body effect. Now, that's the quick and easy way of making matcha. In terms of tasting matcha, well, one, again, the other beautiful thing, you can do this again with any water bottle. You don't need a special matcha shaker or anything like that. You can do this with any water bottle. Room temp, cold brew, good to go, quick energy boost, and you still get lots of flavor. One of the major differences, though, between doing it hot and doing it cold is, imagine like getting pizza and you get it hot. You're able to pick up the spice notes, the sour, the bright notes, and put it in your refrigerator. The next morning, you pull out that pizza, and you end up getting same pizza, same ingredients, but you pick up more of the sweet notes from the cheese or from the tomato sauce, because the molecules are moving slower when it's sweet and when it's cold, compared to when it's hot and spicy. You pick up more of the molecules are moving very fast. So here, this particular way of a very quick 20-second flash brew, you end up getting more of the sweet round notes. In terms of tasting tea, it's very similar when you taste tea compared to when you taste wine, or maybe when you taste coffee as well. So I'm going to talk about it and then I'll do it. So basically, I'm going to draw the liquid in the front of my mouth, swish it around, and I slurp it back so it covers all my taste buds. And then after that, I swallow, and with my lips closed, I take a slow breath out through my nose. Okay, so I'll try not to choke, but here we go. So I first just take a normal sip just to get a baseline. Now, over 80% of what we taste is actually through our sense of smell. So that extra breath, what it does is it really engages the olfactory senses and gets everything enlivened, right? So what you should be tasting is, you should be tasting with matcha, you should be tasting a grassiness, you should be tasting some slight sweetness behind it, and it should be extremely vibrant and fresh and slightly astringent. Remember that puckeriness in the back. All right, now it comes time to, so this is the example of the fast and easy version. Lots of people like matcha iced. Yes, it can be used in smoothies, it can be used in matcha lattes and all sorts of other stuff. And just using a culinary grade or a grade A should be totally fine for those applications. For a straightforward, one of the major differences is going to be origin, potentially not stone ground, and definitely the vibrancy. You want that, spirulina wheatgrass looking shot coming through. Now, in terms of a hot process. So one of the things that you should know is that matchas, because it's steamed and delicately processed, it's very sensitive to temperature. So we prefer a temperature that's closer to between 140 to 160 degrees, if possible. So one of the things that we do, we actually worked with one of the chefs at Spago on basically how can you get from one hot water tower various temperatures. And there's lots of technology that's developed over the years, but you can actually just play with ice cubes. Depending on the pot that you're using, you fill it up with the preferred amount of water, add your ice cubes to it to get that right water temperature. And this is what could be brought out tableside. So that's a hack, okay? A hot water hack. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take the hot water that's been resting at the right temperature, and I'm going to place in the appropriate amount of hot water. I'll do the best I can to try to remain within camera. Now, matcha will sometimes have the tendency to clump. So in terms of tools that could be used, there's several tools that could be used. The first is a bowl. One of the things I like to look for in a bowl is a fairly flat surface in the bottom if possible. And what that does is, as you whisk the matcha, it helps, aerate, it helps to break up any sort of clumps, and helps to really create more frothiness behind it. Some bowls will actually have a dip in it, and that dip actually helps collect the matcha, and as you whisk, it just helps make sure that you get a little bit more aeration out of it. The second thing that's often used when whisking is a matcha whisk, and then there's a matcha holder. And the matcha holder basically just keeps the form. The matcha whisk itself, each strand that you're seeing here is hand cut. This is a bamboo. You could see this is just a true, just authentic bamboo piece, and it's been deliberately cut. Each and every piece has been spliced in order to keep this shape. In order to maintain the shape, a lot of coffee shops will just let it sit. But what I recommend doing is just getting, you can find them on Amazon. You can just get a nice simple matcha holder, and it helps keep its shape for a longer period of time without damaging the bristles. So this is a brand new matcha whisk because it's curled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour hot water over it. I'm going to try to angle my camera down a little bit here, so hopefully you guys can see a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first awaken the whisk. I'm going to pour hot water over it. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to awaken the bowl. I'm gonna get the bowl nice and ready. Apologize if this is not the best angle. There's a little grassroots, but I appreciate you guys tracking with me here today. So what I'm doing is I'm going back and forth. I'm getting the bowl. And this is just water, guys. There's nothing else. There's just water and a whisk and a bowl. Really simple, really clean and straightforward. Now, thanks for that patience on the silence. So by doing this, what I'm also doing is, because it's a ceramic bowl, the heat element behind it, you want to make sure that you have an even heat consistency. Oftentimes you'll see espresso cups sitting on top of an espresso machine to maintain that heat. And this acts in the same way. You're waking up the bowl, you're preheating the bowl. And so that way, the temperature on the outside isn't impacting the temperature on the inside. So when it comes time to actually steeping and making the matcha, you're getting a nice even consistency, okay? So then you take this hot water and you dump it. And now it comes time for the actual preparation. So because sometimes matcha clumps, one of the things that I like to use is a strainer. And you can find multiple variations of strainers. You can easily find them at your Surface if you're in LA, or I'm sure there's multiple other culinary places. This will sit nicely on your matcha bowl or the bowl of your choice. And what you do is you place the matcha inside, and then with a spoon, you end up getting out any extra clumps, just like you would with flour, right? And what you end up getting is a really fine matcha straining through that, that matcha strainer. So now I'm going to try to angle the camera. You guys are awesome here. So for tracking with me on my amateur video tactics. So
it's working.
Cool. So it is great.
Yes.
Tell my wife I'm doing something right. It's great. Just kidding. All right, so I'm placing the matcha inside. Now, naturally, what's going to happen is there's going to be some that's going to sift through. By the way, this for in terms of baking, I mean, just even simply doing this and dusting your favorite chocolate, dusting your cheesecake, dusting yogurt. There's so many beautiful applications. Just a little bit of matcha. One again, it's gonna sharpen the senses. It's gonna wake that experience up, but two, it's gonna make it look more vibrant and beautiful too. So, okay, going back to this. Now I'm gonna take the spoon. I'm gonna very delicately get any sort of clumps out. One of the things that we recommend tableside is that this is pre-sifted in order to save time, and then prepared inside a little canister. What you end up getting is just this beautiful lump. And look at the extreme background of the black. It just makes it much more vibrant. I wish you guys could smell what I'm smelling here, because it's intoxicating. I mean, it's so inviting and it's so intoxicating. When you're dealing with a high quality matcha, it's like sweet corn, or like fresh peeled corn, and taking a bite out of it. So, okay. Now I'm going to pour the hot water over. So you don't need a lot of hot water, but what you would do is, first you kind of stamp out the matcha that's on the inside. Okay. Try to angle it a little bit better. And now you're going to whisk. And the way that you're going to whisk is you're going to zigzag. You're going to go like a Z formation. You can see it starting to froth, or hopefully you guys can see it starting to froth. Then I take the whisk and move it back and forth several times. And you see the tip, you want to see that crema build up on that crown. It's sort of like, my reward, I've done it right. And then you would rinse it out in a normal scenario, then you place it on top. Then what you would do is you take the bowl, and with intention, you'd spin the bowl in front of the customer 3 times, 2, then 3. Then you place it in front of the customer, and then you would encourage the customer also to spin the bowl 3 times, 2, and then 3. And the way that that bowl would be consumed is with one hand underneath, if possible, one hand to the side, and they would drink it. Now, this got a little confusing for one restaurant. They said, well, how do we know if it's exactly 3 turns? So we worked with the ceramic artist to actually place a dot on a bowl, so as a marker. And you could see the frothiness behind it, and that so now that's your way of knowing I've done it right. So ideally, in terms of ratio, I like 2 grams to 6 ounces of water if you want it a bit more heady and full. Or I got to drink this. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Go ahead. We have some questions. Yes, the ratio.
When you're sipping matcha, this isn't necessarily, you're not going to want to make that same slurping sound if you're actually just enjoying the matcha. But when you're going for quality and you want to look for the quality differentiated, that's when you really slurp, and then you swallow in that slow breath out through the nose. So why 3 times? I'm just going to answer this briefly. Well, one, imagine you and I are playing archery, and I've never played archery with you before, but you go and you shoot a bullseye. Now, the first time you hit a bullseye, like, oh, this is awesome. You get an arrow, you pull it back again, you hit a bullseye. Whoa, it could be luck, or you could be amazing. You do it again, you hit a bullseye. All right, there's no question. You're a master of what you're doing. So through this level of mastery that we've discussed several times in terms of some of the different examples, also by whisking and by churning it 3 times, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And I'm setting my full intention behind this experience. And then you're also encouraging the guest to also be fully honed in and focus on their experience through that beginning, middle, and end. We can talk for hours on matcha. I really hope that you guys got some value out of, hopefully you understand my passion behind the leaf. And you've been so gracious with your time. If there are questions, I'd love to be able to answer them. So yeah,
Yeah.
let me know.
We have a few. One point I want to make also is that on this call, which you can't see our attendees, is someone named Michelle Ledoux, who was the general manager at Cut for many years.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's
and
awesome.
Spago. And so she says hi, and she also does remember very well the relationship that you guys had. I'm very curious about how those are formed, the relationship you form with your restaurant clients. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you ready? So I when I was starting in my living room, and this is being recorded, so I'm okay with it, 16 plus years ago, I would fly out to meet with one of the heads of food and beverage, and one of the head chefs named David, at Spago in Las Vegas. And he's like, we're okay with our tea program. We don't need to change our tea program. And for those of you that work with David, probably, maybe that was a good interpretation. I don't know. He's like, what brings you in town anyway? I'm like, oh, I'm visiting a few potential opportunities. Bullshit. I was flying out there to meet with him. And it's like, well, if there is a good time where you might be evaluating, when do you think that might be? He's like, you could check back next month. Flew out next month. What brings you to town? Well, I'm in town. I wanted to sample. I wanted to see if there's an opportunity. I came again, and then it came again, and then it came again. So finally, he's like, all right, let's sample this. Sampled with the different chefs. I talked about origin, talked about my travels with my backpack, going deep into jungles and finding these different teas and blending. And they're like, this guy's the real deal. Like, we need this on our menu. So I think just coming across as the owner, I wasn't bringing in a sales rep, and we have salespeople on our team. They're great. But I just try to come in from a consultative, educational place where I genuinely love hospitality and I want to help people. It's helped me tremendously with tea, and I helped transform many people's lives through tea. And our mission is to impact as many lives as we can through tea. So with that in mind, just kept knocking on the door. That 80% of it, guys, is going to be showing up. You want to sell chocolate, you want to sell goods, you want to sell the fact that you are a culinary expert, and you're going to get your tribe rallied behind your messaging online or in restaurant. Go all in on what you're doing, and you'll get your tribe. It just takes one person to really believe in who you are and what you're about, and that person can be your greatest advocate. And then you'll get two and then three. Don't focus on big, just focus on great. Focus on just delivering the best you possibly can, and you will continue to resonate with other people that just want the best experience possible for themselves and for their guests. Hopefully that answers your question.
That was a very good answer. And was your first client, your first restaurant client?
It was first one was a guy named a restaurant called Ammo, and Benny Baum was like he's an amazing guy. He goes and he gets the vegetables from the local farmers market every day, and he'd bring it in. And I was literally with my Daimo label printing out Uji Gyokoro, English breakfast, and I put it on these little bags and I hand sealed them and hand tied them. He's like, wow, these look so authentic. It looks like you made it with the Daimo label. Like I did. He's like, well, what other customers are you with? And I said, we don't share the customers that we're with. We would give you just as much exclusivity, and we're going to train your staff and make sure you're really well taken care of, just like we would with any other customer. So he was our first customer.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Some people might be having to drop off. I had another question that was asked, but let me just get to that one. That was about, you mentioned tea in the hospitality scene, and that this was from Lachlan Sands, who is our campus president, reminded him of the common practice in China where restaurants would generally serve straight up a pot of hot tea to the table instead of water. Do you think this kind of practice would work in the US, and why?
Yeah, so first of all, the first restaurants in the world were actually tea houses. So along the trading routes, the Silk Roads, the tea routes, they would exchange tea in exchange for money. It was a form of commerce. You have fur, I have ghee, I've churned materials. So tea was a form of commerce, but they also needed this restorative broth to keep them going on these long journeys. And so they would have tea, and in conjunction, they also needed something really fatty and sustaining, so dim sum. So the first restaurants in the world where they needed this restorative broth and fatty food, the energy bars of the world of the day, were dim sum and tea, those combinations. So, yes, tea is a Taiwanese woman's secret to weight loss. Before a meal, having a nice small warm cup, and after a meal to help assimilate the extra negative fats.
Okay, maybe one last question. This is a good one. And are there any Art of Tea stores or locations or offices in New York City?
We sell to various restaurants and cafes. We don't actually have any stores. We are located online, artoftea.com. And I'm not opposed to having a store. It's just not our main focus in Q4 or Q1. And the other thing that you should know is if you want to learn more about tea, we have a Become a Tea Expert at artoftea.com under education. And if you had fun tracking with me today, you can learn more. And there's a whole course that's just us tracking together and having a good time drinking tea.
Cool. We are a couple minutes over. I just want to say, I mean, I think if there was any advice you could give just in terms of those of the attendees who are in the management program who might be one day working, as a general manager or assistant general manager or beverage manager, what should they have on their menu from the tea side? What would be like advice for building that kind of menu?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things you'll see on a menu is like, a frappuccino, a cappuccino, mocha, latte, tea. So in order to, I think, give your tea service what it deserves, dive in and say, Darjeeling, this region, this lot number, this year harvested. Just like you would with wine, approach it in that same way. One, the value of your tea program will go, it is the most profitable item on your menu. Iced tea and hot tea as the largest margins, more than coffee, more than water that you might be losing sales to, more than bread, more than steak, cocktail menu. So give it life, give it energy, and go into the vendor and go into the details. And you don't need more than 4 to 6 teas, in my opinion, but just go into name, origin, and list the vendor. Just like you would, our chicken comes from this farmer, our cheese comes from Humboldt County, whatever it might be, like just go in on it. It's worth the real estate.
It's worth the real estate, and definitely worth, once you get into it, I'm sure you want to go deeper dive. So, and how would people be able to get your teas in their restaurant?
We have a wholesale link. If you go to artoftea.com, wholesale. And by the way, just on your journey, if I can be of assistance, hit me up on LinkedIn. Steve Schwartz, Art of Tea. You can easily find me. And if I can help you in some way, in some form, through my network or just sage advice, not that I, know a lot, but if I can help in some way, I'd be honored to help you guys along your path. And of course, if you are interested in tea for your concept as you get out in the world, I would be super honored to track with you.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Steve, for presenting and doing a whole show for us on matcha. I think that was pretty cool, and we haven't seen that before. So I really appreciate it. Now I really want to get those little packets. I'm sure
give me your address offline. We'll send you something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I want to thank you again for coming today virtually, and again, everybody, we will see you at the next event. Thanks, Steve.
You're awesome. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful, meaningful rest of your day. Bye, guys.